Hi all, this is Kara Smulevitz, your art history teacher. It seems like you landed on an assignment where you'll have to do research, so I wanted to go over the basic rules for research in my classes. Now, every teacher is going to have different rules, so, don't necessarily assume that my rules will pertain to your other classes. Okay, so here's what you have to do. Rule number 1, use reputable sources. I know that reputable is kind of a vague word, but it basically means sources that you can trust for research. Part of that is not using Wikipedia. I love Wikipedia personally. I look at it all the time, but you can't use it for college research because anyone can edit it. It doesn't actually have an editorial process that's going through experts. You could get on there and edit an article whenever you want. So don't use Wikipedia for college research in my classes. Second, your sources should come from somewhere that has an editorial process. I know it can sometimes be hard to tell that, but generally speaking, journals, newspapers, anything that's an established source will have an editorial board, which is experts making sure that the facts are checked. So you don't want to just use like a blog post or something if you don't know that they're going through an editorial process. If you are new to research and you're just not sure how to tell, you can always just ask me too. So if you're trying to apply this general rule and you're like, I have no idea if this journal is an established journal or if it's just something random, send me the link and I'll let you know. For this class, museum sites are really good sources. Now, museum sites sometimes don't look reputable because they don't list an author for the articles, but that's because the museums tend to have a team of people working on the articles together. So for this class, you can pretty much always trust articles that are on museum sites. Rule number 2, cite your quotes. So when you're using a quote inside of your paper, first of all, make sure you use quote marks. If you just write down something from one of your sources without quote marks, I'm going to think you copied it. So make sure you use quote marks, which look like this, when using a direct quote. You should also use a signal phrase. What that means is in your sentence, you're setting up who this quote is from. So you would say something like, as art historian Harold Rosenberg explains, and then you go ahead and you have your quote. Or you could say, as this article from the Met Museum explains, or something like that. But a signal phrase basically signals where the quote comes from and lets the reader know that there is a quote. You should also include an in-text citation at the end of the sentence with the quote in it. Now, there's some different ways to do this depending on what format you're using, but the basic way is at the end of your sentence, just like you see here, you do parentheses and you do the author's last name and then the page number it came from or the year it came from. Sometimes with online sources, you're not actually going to have a page number, so then you would just put the author in a period. This is basically just telling the reader, okay, this came from Rosenberg, it was this page or it was this year, and then they can look down at your bibliography from later, later in the paper and see like the full citation. So this just gives the name. Rule number 3, you do want a bibliography at the end for any research you're doing in my classes. Even if you only used one source, you should still cite it in a bibliography. A bibliography is just a list of the sources you used. Some people call this a works cited page. Basically means the same thing. I usually tell people to use MLA form for this just because that's the basic kind of format that you'll have to use in your English classes, so you might as well get used to it. But if you've already been doing research for a long time and you have some other format you like APA, for example, or Chicago style, that's fine too. I'm not that picky. I just want you to use some established, accepted bibliographic format. So anyone that you like, as long as you're consistent, is fine with me. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, you've never done one before, use MLA because that's the basic one. Here's what a works cited list or a bibliography looks like. This is just a student example. I wanted to show you just visually how it would look. So you write works cited or bibliography, and then you have your list. It's in alphabetical order by the first word. You can easily look up formats for how to cite things online, but here's a couple basics. If you're citing an online source in MLA form, it looks pretty much like this. You do the last name of the author, then their first name, then the title of the web page you're on, then the website, and then this information. Sometimes you're not going to be able to find one element of these things, in which case you just leave that part out. Here's an example. So last name, first name, title of the page, the website it came from, etc. Here's how you would do it for a journal article. It's really similar. Last name, first name, title of the article, title of the journal, the year. So I know I'm going through this fast. It's really easy for you to look this up on your own. There's a million different sources that will show you examples of how to cite things. There's even some that will do it automatically for you when you put in the information. Okay, so that's the 3 rules. Rule number 1, use reputable sources. Rule number 2, cite your quotes. And rule number 3, include a bibliography at the end. If you go basically by these, I'll be happy. I'm not that picky as an instructor about this. I just want you to make an effort to cite things correctly. If you've got a comma in the wrong place, I'm not going to be too worried about it. But remember, that's just for my class. This is going to be different for every teacher that you take. Okay, that's it. Good luck with your research.